Your 20s are supposed to be your prime. You're smart, did well in school, and people told you you're going to do great things. And yet, something feels off. While others seem to be getting promotions and finding direction, you feel stuck, overthinking and second-guessing. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Being smart in your 20s can actually make you more likely to fail. Not because you lack ability, but because of how your mind works. So let's break down the 4 psychological patterns that keep you stuck in your 20s. Pattern 1. Over-optimization. Smart people don't just make decisions, they analyze them. Your brain runs simulations constantly. What if I choose the wrong career? What if I waste my potential? This is called maximization, the tendency to search for the absolute best option instead of a good enough one. And in your 20s, when everything feels like it matters, this becomes paralyzing. You don't just want a job, you want the right job, with growth, meaning, and alignment. So you plan, compare, and wait. Meanwhile, someone less analytical just picks something and gains momentum. Here's the irony. In your 20s, speed beats precision. The brain's prefrontal cortex, responsible for long-term forecasting, is highly active in intelligent individuals. That's great for strategy. But life in your 20s is less about perfect strategy and more about rapid iteration. Smart people often fail not because they choose wrong, but because they delay choosing at all. You mistake movement for commitment. You think starting means locking yourself in forever. It doesn't. In your 20s, action is data, waiting is stagnation, and sometimes intelligence turns into hesitation. Pattern 2. Identity attachment. If you were labeled the smart one growing up, that label becomes part of your identity, and identities are fragile. Psychologist Carol Dweck's research on fixed versus growth mindsets shows something powerful. When people tie their self-worth to being naturally intelligent, they avoid situations where they might look incompetent. So what happens in your 20s? You enter arenas where you're no longer the smartest in the room. Everyone was top of their class. Everyone is ambitious. Everyone is talented. Suddenly, effort replaces ease. And for someone used to effortless success, that feels threatening. So instead of risking failure, you switch goals. Say, I'm still figuring things out. Quit when something gets hard. Not because you can't do it, but because failing would challenge your identity. If you've always succeeded without trying, trying becomes terrifying, because now failure can't be blamed on lack of effort. This is why many gifted students burn out early in adulthood. They were rewarded for intelligence, but never trained for resilience. In your 20s, consistency beats brilliance, and smart people sometimes struggle with that shift. Pattern 3. Hyper-awareness. Intelligent people see nuance. You don't just see one career path, you see 10. You don't just see one worldview, you see contradictions everywhere. This cognitive complexity is powerful, but in your 20s, it can feel overwhelming. Barry Schwartz, author of The Paradox of Choice, explains how having too many options increases anxiety and decreases satisfaction. Smart people generate more options internally than most people see externally. You imagine alternative careers, alternate timelines, different countries, different versions of yourself. And because you can visualize them so clearly, committing to one feels like killing the others, so you stall. Meanwhile, someone with a simpler mental model commits early and compounds progress. You're not confused, you're cognitively overloaded. Your intelligence expands possibility. But possibility without commitment leads to fragmentation. At some point, clarity doesn't come from thinking more. It comes from choosing and adapting. Pattern 4. Existential pressure. Here's the truth. Smart people don't just want success, they want significance. You don't want to just make money. You want meaning, impact, purpose. And that depth is beautiful, but it creates pressure. In your 20s, you feel like time is ticking, like you're supposed to build something extraordinary. Like wasting your potential would be unforgivable. Psychologists call this gifted anxiety, the chronic fear of underachievement among high-ability individuals. You compare yourself constantly, not just to others, but to what you think you could be. Every year that passes feels like evidence, I should be further. I'm capable of more. Why am I not there yet? That pressure becomes heavy. So heavy that it leads to burnout, paralysis, or escapism. You scroll, you consume, you plan, but you don't build. Because building would test whether your potential is real, and that's terrifying. The tragedy isn't lack of ability, it's the fear of discovering your limits. Final thoughts. Here's the truth. Your intelligence was never the problem. It just made everything heavier. More options, more pressure, more awareness of what could go wrong, and what you could become. But your 20s aren't a test of how smart you are. They're a test of how willing you are to move before you feel ready. Clarity comes after action. Confidence comes after repetition. Direction comes after mistakes. Smart people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they wait for certainty. And the moment you stop waiting, the moment you act while still unsure, that's when everything shifts. Not because you got smarter, but because you finally started.